right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob, and he is here with us all the way on the other side of the Atlantic, someplace between here in New York or Netherlands or something like that. Jacob, where are you today?
I'm at Utrecht at the Moriel Europe base in Utrecht, Holland. We have a conference tomorrow and Sunday, and the details are on the Moriel Dutch language website if you care to join us. The conference will be in English and in Dutch, but we can provide translation as necessary into German or French additionally, should it be required. I don't think we'll get people coming from much beyond those countries. Nonetheless, here we are. And the conference is going forth with myself tomorrow here in Utrecht, which is where Moriel Europe is based. So I'm in Utrecht at the moment. I've just gotten back from South Africa. I was back in England for 2 days, but I'm now in Europe once again, continental Europe. Looking forward to the conference tomorrow.
Well, thanks for coming out, Jacob. Thanks for being with us, and we look forward to a good episode as well as a good conference tomorrow.
David Lister will announce that we have upcoming dates in the United States as well. I'll be coming to the United States the week after, in about 2 weeks, and we will have meetings in Ohio, New York, Baltimore, Devore near Los Angeles, San Bernardino, and I think somewhere else. Plus, we're going to have a fellowship drive. So David will announce those details.
Well, thanks, Jacob. I appreciate that you did that. You've got it. We're going to put the schedule up next week.
Okay.
All right. So on to Margot.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being with us, David. I was just going to introduce you down in the South. So, David, thanks for being with us again.
Yeah. The first one is Ed Corey in Appleton, West Virginia. Then we're coming to your place and a few others. So we'll make the dates available. So they'll be up on the website this weekend or early Monday.
All right. God bless you. Thank you, brother. And of course, down the freeway from me, Jay, how you feeling today?
Oh, I am a little under the weather, but I will make it.
Thanks for being with us here, brother. Thanks for your sacrifice. Blessings to you. Hope you do get well. And down under, Davey.
Hey, morning, everyone, or good evening for Jacob. Good afternoon.
Hey.
Yeah, good to be here.
Thanks, Davey. And of course, Davey, you been working really hard on our trip to Australia, New Zealand. Well, you're there already. David and I are coming out to see you and the believers there. And any updates on that you can give us?
Yes, we're pretty much getting the schedule finalized. We will be going to Sydney, to Brisbane, Perth, Melbourne, and both the North and South Island of New Zealand. Apologies to those who live in Adelaide and to those who live in Tasmania. Unfortunately, we won't get to South Australia or Tasmania this year, but please try and catch us in either Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, Melbourne, or both the North and South Island of New Zealand. We should be able to release the dates and that soon.
Thanks, David. Looking forward to being with the believers there in Australia and New Zealand and spending some time there encouraging believers and putting in some steel into their hearts and soul as we look forward to the Lord's return. We're going to need the courage and we're going to need to grow in faith. So may the Lord use us for that. Jay, real quick before we move on, the podcast schedule, I believe, is out for next week. Do you have that?
I do. So let me bring this up. As you know, we are on Podcast Addict, Podchasers, Pocket Cast, Deezer. Each podcast is available at 5 a.m. Central Time. 8:25, we have Friday with Jacob Prasch, The Four Horsemen, Part 1. 8:26, we have the Weekend Bible Study with Jacob Prasch, Understanding the Apocalypse. On August 27th, Sunday morning service, the Book of Colossians, Pray, Walk, Speak, Part 1. On 8:28, we have this episode of Catching Up with Jacob. On 8:29, we have the Bible Study by Sandy Simpson, 1 Corinthians 8. On 8:30, Ken's Corner, episode 24. 8:31, Jacob's Midweek Bible Study, the Book of Exodus, Part 5. Chapter 3. Moriel Podcast can be found on Moriel.org, Moriel.tv, Buzzsprouts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many other places. Please make them available for your listening pleasure.
So whatever you need in terms of study, in terms of podcasts, in terms of news, you can find it all there. And get to memorial.org, get to the information that Jay was talking about, and avail yourself of those studies. You can, I don't know, Jay, can you download those studies? Like if the average person, can they just download them, save as? And
Yes,
the file?
they can.
Okay.
They can save them forever. All they need to do is save them and then put them on a hard drive, and they'll be there for as long as the hard drive keeps spinning.
That's right. And you know what? And the reason why I bring that up is just a lot of things have become very difficult to get. A lot of the censorship has been going on for some time now, and it's increasing. And of course, we see the tech overlords completely ruling and reigning over any media, any audio, anything that they don't like. So a lot of times it's really good to save this stuff, put it in your file, put it in your hard drive, put it in your flash drive, share it, burn it to a CD if you know how to do that. I think people still do that. And those are going to be very important at a time where a lot of people lose electrical power, electrical grid goes down, they don't have internet. They'll be able to save that, and they'll be able to play it, and they'll be able to hold it and be able to share it. So, well, we thank you, those who are watching live with us on many different platforms, from Rumble to Telegram to Vimeo, of course, YouTube and Facebook, and of course, our flagship memorial.tv, memorialtv.org. We're also on RTN. Get a hold of those platforms. Rumble, it's ever growing and ever increasing, as well as memorial.tv.
Yes.
Ask questions on Rumble. So we're going to go to backstage and ask some questions. And we do have a backstage that's really updated in terms of what's going on in the world. Not only are the new restrictions coming to the US, but they're also coming to the rest of the world, as this seemingly variant is traveling very, very fast, traveling faster than Jacob around the world. I don't know, Jacob's the variant may beat you here to the States. I think they might have already. And we'll be talking about that. And well, maybe you're the cure to the variant. So we'll be talking about that on backstage, what Fauci's saying about the coming world crisis and all this stuff. So anyway, you have to wait and see that, and we'll put Jacob to some questions and he'll answer that, and we'll talk about that on backstage. So get a hold of that. And you won't be able to watch it on YouTube and Facebook, so you're going to have to leave those platforms and get to Rumble. So I encourage you to do that. You can do that now. You can do that later. At the same time, we'll be on backstage, not on YouTube and not on Facebook. So if you want to do that now, feel free to do so. Jacob Prasch, let's get started. The mug shot heard around the world. We heard the shot around the world. This is the mug shot around the world. Trump surrenders to the authorities in Atlanta, is released after booking, but this is a seminal moment in American political history. Perhaps it's never happened. Nothing's ever happened like this before. Jacob, has war been declared? Is a civil war now pretty much a final? We're just waiting for the shots to go off, or are we being too hyperbolic on that? But this seems to be, we've been calling it, but this seems to be a pretty unprecedented event.
When Stacey Abrams, a Black woman who lost 2 elections in Georgia, said the elections were stolen and demanded recourse, there was no indictment, no suggestion of a criminal investigation. Hillary Clinton went on saying that Trump was not a legitimate president. We had mainstream media, one liar after another, the liars of The View, they call themselves women, I just call them liars, treating as fact that there was collusion with Putin and with Russia by Trump. There was never any talk of any indictment of these people, even when their claims were proven false. When they did the same things they're accusing Trump of doing, there was never any talk of indictment. This is politically orchestrated. Now, in a just world, which we do not live in, this prosecutor who's politically motivated should die in solitary confinement, never to be seen or heard from again. If I had my way, that's what would become of her. However, that's not going to happen. My prayer is rather that the Almighty will raise his hand against her. Now, again, I am not supporting the candidacy for the re-election of Donald Trump for a couple of reasons, one of which was hosting the homosexual and lesbian gala at Mar-a-Lago. That is one. Secondly, I believe his failed political leadership as party leader in the past midterm elections could be a harbinger of political failure in the next presidential and congressional election. I do not have confidence in Mr. Trump anymore. Of course, I'd rather see him than Biden or something, but he's not my candidate of choice. Nonetheless, what's being done to him is politically motivated. We have the Federal Bureau of Intimidation, not a legitimate criminal investigation agency to the degree it ever was. It always has been corrupt, going back to the time of Hoover. It has always been a political Gestapo to some degree, but not to the degree it is now. We have a corrupt Justice Department under Garland, a man, again, who himself should be impeached, and I think criminally investigated. The entire thing is a insult to any American of even average intelligence, irrespective of their political party. There are two standards, absolutely two standards, and it is not a matter of jurisprudence or justice. It is a politically driven agenda. I hope the Almighty intervenes. But the fact that it's happening shows God's judgment on a nation that has turned its back on him. As the founding fathers knew, as the Puritans in England knew, unless you are governed by men who are governed by God on the basis of biblical principles, democracy will fail. Well, democracy is failing. There is no equal justice under the law. Biden should be impeached. Hunter Biden should be in prison, almost certainly, if convicted, and he's not even going to face a trial the way it seems now.
Right.
It's completely corrupt. And if you can't see that, you're either corrupt yourself or you're a person of subhuman intelligence. If you watch The View, you probably are a person of subhuman intelligence.
No doubt this has been unprecedented, but Jacob, well, let me go to David first. I'll come back to Jacob. David, is this the first shot, maybe second shot, maybe 10th shot that war's been declared, that there's a civil war coming? I mean, did you see the protests? Did you see even African Americans for Trump coming out and supporting him? It seems like people are not going to take this laying down. And yet his team has been booked, fingerprinted. Some are still in jail at this point, all because the conspiracy is to overturn the results of the 2020 election. But has we crossed some form of Rubicon now?
We're getting there. If they find him guilty and put him in jail, it could push us into a civil war. But because his popularity is going up, his and the other candidates aren't making any inroads, so there's no one coming that can replace him. And if they take him out of the election or bar him from election, or there's even a movement that within the Republicans that they won't allow him on the ballot. And even Robert Kennedy Jr. said, look, indictments can't keep you off the ballot.
Right.
Convictions can, and that's
Correct.
it. If they get the wrong guy, and if they actually convict him, then the question will raise whether he can be put on a ballot, and then that's another step. So we are approaching a dangerous time in America. But then again, if something like this would happen, it would certainly send America spinning into a place of chaos, which the government could easily, implement a state of emergency, which they could use all sorts of troops to put down rebellions and so-called rebellions. So it's dangerous, Marco. It's just getting, for many people, they're seeing it's almost hopeless.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about it here for some time. Even last year, I said, hey, don't discount a possible civil war. Don't discount a possible civil war, because we're already in one, philosophically, ideologically, whatever you want to call it. But now it's moved into another phase where 13 criminal counts against Trump, at the state level. So something that it's not at a federal level, state level. His 19, well, together 19, 18 plus him, 19 defendants charged with a RICO indictment. So nothing to sneeze at in terms of what they're trying to do in Georgia. And that is, of course, DA Fani Willis that filed the charges against Trump and against other 18, some of his lawyers. Giuliani's there. So Fulton County District Attorney, another one of those lovely George Soros influencers, right? So, Jacob, at some point, that's got to be at the root level.
Okay, there are people, I'm not one of them as a Christian, but there are people who are so indignant, who will say, look, most of the armed citizens, most of the NRA membership and so forth are in red states. Let's get it over with. Let's shoot Pelosi dead. Let's shoot Schumer dead. Let's shoot Joy Reid dead. There are people who think that way. Fortunately, there's not many of them. But when you go to this kind of extreme, you lend credence to extremists on the other side. Real extremists. You are giving credence to the people who know how to capitalize or who will capitalize on the righteous indignation of the public who's seeing this complete prostitution of justice by a political whore pretending to be a prosecutor. That's what's happening. My fear is that there will be extreme elements coming up on the political right who will want this. Now, I obviously don't want this, but I can see how something like this can happen.
Yeah. Maybe two words, right? It could be that, an extremist, or it could be, I guess you could say it this way so YouTube doesn't track it. You could say white, and later on we can say flag, meaning a provocateur going in there and blaming it on on conservatives. This is what's going on. Now, in the meantime, obviously Trump's a turning signal that they will be fighting over this, right? So October 23rd is a trial. It might be considered the trial of the century by this estimate. But Jacob, he was also with Tucker Carlson. We've got millions and millions of views. I forget what the tally was at the end. Much bigger than the Fox debate with the Republican candidate. We'll get to that in a moment. But there's one question that Tucker asked that was very indicative of the time in which we live. I mean, I literally almost fell off my chair because it was a great question. He has right questions, which I always enjoy the journalism of Tucker. But he asked the question whether or not the deep state is planning to assassinate him, because he says that's the only thing left. They charged you, they indicted you, they put all these things, they haven't put you in jail just yet. The only thing you got, and then you go up in numbers. Your poll numbers go up when this happens. The only thing they have left is, are they going to try to kill you? Now, God forbid this happens for anyone, but RFK Jr. talked about that.
Yes.
They got my uncle, they got my dad. I wouldn't be surprised if they go after me. I'm not scared, but this is the way they act.
Yes.
Jacob, Banana Republic stuff. I mean, they just shot the president in Ecuador. They shot him, they killed him. I mean, is this what is becoming here?
Look, this has always gone on covertly. I've always believed that the mafia was involved in killing JFK, or was largely responsible for the assassination of JFK, with collaboration of elements in the intelligence community, particularly the CIA. I've always believed that. Always. The Senate investigations into the assassinations said that there was a cover-up. They said there was a cover-up. We know that Dulles and J. Edgar Hoover, these were corrupt people. Earl Warren, certainly General Ford, these were unprincipled men with no scruples whatsoever. These were just unprincipled men.
Exactly.
And RFK is telling, and look, he's a liberal. I don't agree with him politically, but he's telling the truth. He's telling, he knew what happened to his family, and he knew that the intelligence community had a hand in it. Yes, they could kill Trump. Just look at their desperation, what they're doing. Look at the desperation of what they are doing. Something else, the Tucker Carlson interview, the amount of people watching it, Now, it is not just the network news
Right.
or the CNN or MSNBC. It's not just those platforms that are losing viewership. Now Fox is losing it.
Oh, yeah.
Fox is losing it.
Yeah.
The media is losing its capacity to control public opinion, except for stupid people. And there's a fair amount of stupid people. But except for stupid people, they are losing their capacity to control public opinion. And they know it. The media is becoming desperate. They're fighting to save their own roast.
No doubt. I think I mean, I don't know. Did you get an invite to Fox's memorial service? Because it's pretty much it's a dead deal. David, real quick, do you think that could actually happen? I mean, what kind of a world would we embark if this is the going after political candidates, one from their own political party and another one that is hated, which is Trump? But obviously this will set the nation on fire. I don't think there's any turning back from that. But my question for you is also on top of that is, will there be any election in 2024?
Well, that would be a look. If open rebellion breaks out and they declare emergency, they could suspend the Constitution, and because they don't have any law now. You've got a lawyer has been arrested and put in jail for working for Donald Trump, which we've never had lawyers being arrested for anybody. You know, it's so he's going to be compelled to tell what he knows, but that's supposed to be one of the sacrosanct things that we have in our country. You know, you're supposed to be able to talk to your lawyer freely, but if this happens and starts, we will have joined the rest of the world in a third world banana republic.
And the outcome of it,
we'll lose we could lose our freedoms very, very quickly after that.
Yeah. Can you imagine a scenario where these elections will be suspended, David? I mean, if you think about it, I mean, one could be maybe not elections suspended, but removing Trump off the ballot, which he has said it'd be better off for every Republican to take their name off the ballot, because it's not going to matter if his name's not on there. So they should just drop out of the race, which will indicate that now the Democrats are going to be suppressing a whole political party. Nobody can run, right? It'll be Venezuela, it'll be Nicaragua.
You're right, Marco, but let us not forget, sorry, David, just for a moment. Let us not forget, among those Democrats, you can probably count Mitch McConnell, certainly John Cornyn, Mitt Romney. You can count the Bush dynasty and Cheney. You can count a lot of Republicans as Democrats, because that's effectively what they are. They're in the tradition of the late John Kane. They're, as I've said multiple times, Democrats who sit on the opposite side of the aisle.
That's right. Now, David, do you have anything else on that one? I mean, it'll be unprecedented, but what could actually cause a election to be suspended?
What could cause it? I mean, look, we've given so much power to the office of the presidency, and then his ability to control the control of the executive branch, which is law enforcement, FBI, CIA, all this, the State Department, that is all under his power. They have basically, in my opinion, been cooperating together to create this deep state that is suppressing the individual rights of not only people. We've seen teacher groups, we've seen parent groups. We saw back a long time ago, I believe under Obama, where conservatives, 5013Cs were suppressed. So there's so much. We've seen just everything, and the ability of the internet to control your finances, to control your life, control even your ability to go shopping. they can shut this down relatively quickly. They're
Mm,
doing it already with people's money in the UK. And so, we passed laws long time ago called bailouts, where they're allowed to come into our bank accounts. So these laws have been on since Bush's day.
mm.
So they
Well,
can
there's-
come in.
Yep.
Our money is not safe. It's not safe. And more so as they bring in electronic dollars.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It even goes back to Roosevelt when he restricted
Yeah.
the right to own gold. None of this is new. Another factor, though, that we need to really look at is if Miley made that phone call to China at the time when Biden ran against Trump, and Miley made that phone call to China, Miley should have been suspended as commander of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He should have been relieved of his command, and he should have been court-martialed. And if found guilty, he should have died in Leavenworth. That was Miley. This disgusting clown, this thing who's basically has his rank because of affirmative action policies in the military. He is there and he says his goals are diversity and inclusivism. They need to control the military to use it as a police force against the populace, as happens in any banana republic.
That's right. It has to be military. Yeah, let me pivot something real quick, which is about the current president, which most of the country sees that this is an unbelievable fiasco. It didn't go well in Maui. He failed to show up 2 weeks later, only to fall asleep. There's no way the Dems haven't seen the decline for 2.5 years. They have to have some kind of break the glass in case of emergency, because this is not going to end well, Jacob. He compares a devastating fire in Maui to his kitchen fire. He falls asleep. He only approved $700 for Maui citizens while Ukraine gets a blank check. After finally showing up for a couple of hours or so, maybe a day, goes back to Tahoe. And the residents are absolutely furious that there's been no help. There's been more concern about what they didn't do than what they've actually done, if any at all. And he's an unmitigated disaster. Is this his Katrina, or people just don't care?
Again, when you look at the people who vote Democrat, you're looking at people who either have a vested interest, they're vassals of the establishment, or they are people who are exceptionally naive and people of low intelligence who are easily manipulated. Again, they're like the women who watch The View. They're people of low intelligence who are very, very stupid, who have no discernment, who are oblivious to reality. There is a lot of stupid people. And the Democratic Party believes that most Black people are stupid. They look down upon Blacks as being stupid, and that people who we can easily manipulate, they'll believe what they're told and do what we tell them. This goes back to the political strategy of LBJ. It's always been like that. Now, anybody could know that the pro-Ku Klux Klan policies of the founder of Democratic Party progressivism, Woodrow Wilson, he had the Klan involved in his inauguration. He segregated the post office and federal departments in the American South. He segregated Blacks out of them. This is the founder of the progressive wing, the main founder of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party that is now the predominant wing. Now, anybody of functional intelligence would say, I'm not voting for these people, but they think Blacks are stupid enough that they will vote for them. And unfortunately, there's enough Blacks proving them right. Instead of listening to Candace Owen or to Larry Elder or to Thomas Sowell, or to listening to honest Blacks who know the facts and are telling them the truth, they will listen to these, I call them Sanbos. A Sanbo is in the book of Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom was not an Uncle Tom. He was flogged to death for not betraying the location of runaway slaves. He was flogged to death by Simone Legree. The Black who cooperated with the white plantation owner was Sanbo. And he's Barack Obama, of course, he's half white anyway, is a Sanbo. You know, Joy Reid, she's a Sambo. Senator Booker, he's a Sambos. And they believe that blacks will listen to Sambos instead of listening to intellectuals.
Now, there's so much out of Maui, David, you know, the kids that were sent back to school, they got stuck in the car, people that were burnt alive. People are asking, where are these children? There's over 1,000 people that probably are dead, mainly a lot of children missing still. And nobody wants to answer. The mayor doesn't want to answer. The governor's talking about Build Back Better. The mayor is upset that you even question him when he doesn't have answers. They're verbally attacking the people in Hawaii, the people of Maui. I mean, is enough is enough? Is it the break glass emergency scenario now for Biden, or are they just going to keep rolling? And I'm going to tell you something real quick. This is just me.
Okay.
I think he wins in 2024 because it's so broken.
Well, not that you're being a prophet, but I hope you're wrong. But anyway,
Yeah.
there's a couple citizens journalists have popped up there in Hawaii, and they've been exposing some of the things. Like right now, we know that 1 out of 4 of the children attending elementary schools are now missing. This gentleman reports that they know they pulled out hundreds of children's bodies on the first day. They also said that the man that did not turn the sirens on justified his decision of doing it, and then the next day retired for health reasons. We know that the water was turned off.
Yeah, there's a lot of
we
problems
know
with water.
we
Yeah.
know barricades were put up, and the people that didn't breach the barricades and get out of there died.
Yes.
And then we also know that the firemen were actually at risk when the water went off, and we know that now the company, the power company, may be guilty of already trying to alter the information there in there. They're already trying to mess it over. So there's so many questions of corruption and everything, and stupidity, and just all these things going wrong now, that you have to wonder, are these people so totally baked under the sun every day that they're just become incompetent in their jobs? Or was there really something to this? Because there's a lot of questions that have to be answered here, and not finding hundreds of people to this day. They know where they are. They left them in the water, and it's just and also now we're going to see what happens when the real estate starts coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Just sending somebody $700,
Yeah, that's not going to do anything.
that ain't even going to pay a rent on their new high-rise building.
You've been to Hawaii.
Yeah.
Hawaii is very expensive.
But it makes them desperate, doesn't it? If a corporation comes in and say, "Hey, we see you have 4 plots. We'll give you 10 times its value." So I suspect everything for corruption. I question authority since I was a teenager, and it's only making me question authority even more. I'm so sorry for the people of Lahaina, but they're already talking multi-year rebuild, and who's going to be able to hold out?
Yeah. Build Back Better, now it's in play.
Then because the insurance company, which I think most insurance companies are like bad slot machines, they don't pay off. So they're going to be suing the power company, the water company, everybody in the world not to have to pay this bill.
Yes.
So checks aren't going to go out.
Yep, and it's going to get stuck in there, and it's going to move in. Some international companies going to move in to put some renewables, and it's going to be crazy. Davey,
and most people, I don't know if you know, but that area was a lush area for a long time. But when Jack Dole of Dole Pineapple came, he took the water from there and diverted it over to his plantations, and that became a desert. So, and also Jack Noel was a Republican. So this can help us understand, I think,
I remember
the
Jay
voting. I
talking
think,
about that last.
I believe it was Jay explained that to me or
Yeah, well,
somewhere.
the indigenous Hawaiians who call non-Hawaiians haoles vote Democrat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
I was just going to be a little bit sarcastic, but this really kind of shows you where shows you the corruption of the administration. It's kind of like, yeah, David said, yeah, the poor Hawaiians, they get $700. Meanwhile, they're just sending billions more to the Ukraine so that Zelensky can buy another mansion in Egypt, which he just did the other day. He's got mansions in Florida, he's got mansions all over the place. So he's just bought another one in Egypt. So yeah, they're that desperate for money in the Ukraine.
He's a real estate mogul suddenly. He's quite the real estate developer now.
Yeah,
I guess his acting classes didn't go so well, so he had to go into real estate, which is a common thing. Jacob, but the other side of the coin, which is the Republican Party, which you already mentioned, that it's worthless too. They just had the I don't even know what to call it. It was a circus nonetheless. There's probably one guy that spoke, somewhat intelligent, was Vivek Ramaswamy. And but the whole Republican debate was absolutely a sham with all these people there, including Mike Pence. The one thing I wanted to bring up, and we were talking about it before we started the episode, was this little comment where Vivek Ramaswamy says, you know what, we shouldn't be giving this much money to Israel.
Israel, yes.
Militarily, we shouldn't take the whole funding out, but militarily, we need to take our the money that we spend here, we spend militarily, and use it here, use it for homeless, use it for infrastructure, use it for all these things, and stop sending the money everywhere, including Israel militarily. Now, Nikki Haley jumped in, which she's known to be a war hawk. She's known to be a neocon. She says, America doesn't need, we don't need Israel. America needs Israel. Of course, it went on and they just spouted off some other nonsense, but it led me to think about some of the stuff that people have said, as well as people that comment on this current issue. America needs Israel. Okay, that's one question. The other thing is, it's a lot of money sent militarily to Israel, which a lot of people are going, do we need to send that much money to Israel? What? And then as Christians, now this is a third level, as Christians would say, well, why is America supporting a non-believing Jewish state that goes against Christians? Why are they supporting it? So there is a level here where, is there a point? I guess my question, is there a point, or should we blindly support Israel no matter what they want and what they'll get?
Okay, what should be done and what will be done are two different things. What should be done is in the national interest. What will be done will be in the globalist interest if they have their way.
That's right.
It is interesting that Nikki Haley is an ethnic Indian. She's of Indian descent from India.
Yeah.
As was her opponent. They're both of them. That was interesting in itself. But let's look at the realities. The United States supports the Palestinian Authority. The United States supports the people in Gaza who are controlled by Hamas through the United Nations. They look at Israel, but they don't look at the fact that the United States is giving money to Israel's opponents, the Palestinians, as well. Subtract one from the other, what are you left with? Now, Israel received substantially more. However, under the terms of Camp David, there had to be a kind of equity between aid given to Egypt and aid given to Israel. It's something where we were obliged by international law to do by the terms of Camp David. When challenged after the debate, he tried to, or he did, requalify his position, or tried to. He says when the present agreement expires with Israel in 2028, we should stop doing it. If a peace has been agreed between Israel and Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, and the defense assistance is no longer continued. Now, right away, that tells me, even though he may be saying a lot of other things that are ideologically right, when it comes to geopolitics and international affairs, and the strategic realities of geopolitics, he's out of his league. Let's understand Iran is there, and it is a real threat. Israel is one of the few people we can rely on to control the reality of Iran, to counter Putin's adventurism in Syria. Israel is the most stable country politically in the Middle East. There's no one else you can rely on. They're all vulnerable. All of them are internally vulnerable. Even the ones that seem relatively stable, like Jordan, have their vulnerabilities, as we saw in Black September in 1970. They're all vulnerable, except Israel. That's the first reality. The second reality is going back to the Cold War. I remember U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy flight commanders and avionics engineers from McDonnell Douglas debriefing Israeli pilots after they had aerial dogfights with Syrian-flown, Russian-manufactured MiG jets. The Middle East has always been a place where the United States has tested its hardware against its potential enemies, particularly Russia, that time the Soviets. Okay. Israel has the highest amount of upstart high-tech companies in the world outside of the United States, and many, many American high-tech companies from Silicon Valley and increasingly Texas and so forth are doing their R&D in Israel and have bought these Israeli upstart companies located in the high-tech belt of Israel and in the Herzliya area north of Tel Aviv. The Arrow 3 system, just sold to Germany, was a joint American-Israeli development. It is in the interest of the United States to have military intelligence and technological cooperation with the Israelis. It is in our national interest. If we lose it, it will be to our detriment. This guy does not really understand that too well. Anybody who thinks we should cut back aid to Israel does not even understand that aid is also going to the so-called Palestinians, that aid is also going to Egypt, that aid is also going to a lot of people, who, including those who don't like Israel or hate Israel. Neither are they understanding that it is a two-way street. It is mutually beneficial, particularly in the development of high-tech military hardware, not to mention intelligence. They're speaking out of ignorance and bigotry. They don't understand the strategic realities. It is in the interest of the United States to continue this. But the good of the country is something that the present people in the White House could care less about.
Yeah, no doubt. David, any thoughts on that comment itself? And I mean, I think the bigger comment that I wanted to make after what Jacob was talking about is the fact that you got these neocons that they just want to start war everywhere. So at the same time, they support Israel, but they fund every war imaginable. Middle East destabilization, Eastern Europe destabilization, war against Russia, war against China. There's not a war that they don't like.
Yep.
Well, not a war that the Dems don't like either. So, you know, because ever since General Smedley Butler, a two-time Medal of Honor winner, warned America, these men want to wage war, and which is something paid for in young people's blood, but old men profit. And we have not listened to his since before World War I. It was going that way, and we keep involving ourselves in every situation. There was no reason we needed to be in Vietnam. The Vietnam people actually had hope that America would come in because they didn't like the Chinese. We could have had wonderful harbors there and listening posts on China's border, and missiles too if we wanted, but they have just thinking that war is good for business. And this is the attitude of the hawks in the Republican Party. It's the love of the Democratic Party And I don't know if we're ever going to be able to change it because, well, Trump did stop it, and he even negotiated a good withdrawal from Afghanistan. But Biden and his policies have pushed us right back into wars and more wars.
And
So,
gave Afghanistan over to the Taliban.
yep,
Yeah.
gave
In
that.
any event, understand something. Neocons are not neoconservatives. They're not conservatives. Neocons are establishment Republicans. They're rhinos.
That's
They are
right.
not conservatives. Neocon means neocon artist. It does not mean neoconservative.
Yeah.
Crystal and these guys, they're just political con artists.
Yeah.
Yeah, they come under a new title so they can fool the people, you know. We're the new conservatives, just like the old conservatives. We should play the Who song, Don't Get Fooled Again, right now.
Yeah. What made Trump Trump in his first administration, what made Donald Trump was he did not simply run against the Democratic Party, he ran against the Republican Party. He
Yep.
ran against the House of Bush. He ran against the Republican Party establishment. That's what made Trump Trump.
Yeah.
I assure you, the rhinos hate him as much as the Democrats do. Unfortunately, I believe he's caused God to remove his hand from him over that homosexual gala. I don't believe God's hand is on Donald Trump again. I really don't. He may win, but I don't believe he's God's agent anymore the way he was the first time.
Can I ask you something, Jacob? Let's say we got a Democratic Party minus Kennedy, and we have Trump. So he's been the most, even though he's been the most pro-Christian president, and even trying to stop persecutions of Christian worldwide, the best president when it comes to abortion, the best on appointing good judges, conservative judges.
By far the best.
Okay, so we have all
And the best on
he's
Israel.
always
And
gonna
the
come
best
back.
on Israel.
Okay, best on Israel. So an American is left with that choice and the Democrats. Now, to not vote is you get no right to bitch and moan.
Okay.
So who do you vote
I'm
for?
just saying I will protest vote, but I cannot vote for any candidate who promoted homosexuality as a Christian.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I'd rather have Trump than whoever,
Yeah.
but I can't vote for somebody who promoted homosexuality.
Well, I'm just you're talking to people and we're influencing them. So what is a Christian supposed to do? Not vote?
I have never
No,
said
I
that.
didn't say you say. I know you're just saying it for yourself, but you are an influence to people. And so what if we're left with that choice?
First of all, prayer is the most important thing. The Lord establishes kings and removes kings according to Daniel. Pray that the best person for the country and for the body of Christ and for Israel gets elected. That is the first thing. Voting is a matter of individual conscience before the Lord.
Correct.
I, just speaking for myself, cannot vote for any candidate who promoted homosexuality and lent sanction to it. I cannot vote for anyone who did it. God is no respecter of persons. It's too serious of a moral issue. I can't vote for anyone who did it. It's just the way it is. Additionally, the leadership or the bad leadership exhibited by Donald Trump, and not only Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell, others were responsible. What happened in Pennsylvania was an abortion, was a fiasco that never should have happened. I can see that kind of failure under his leadership being repeated.
Well,
God forbid.
God forbid. Yeah. So but if we get the choice, a lot of people will have to make that decision. And I
Yes.
think that, look, I believe that I don't believe in this social justice, voting, social rights. I believe that every American should have every right that it's entitled to.
Yes.
And look, I understand there's homosexuality, but they do have rights to participate in the political
I'm
system.
not questioning their rights.
Yeah,
I'm
I know.
I'm questioning the public endorsement
Yeah.
of a perversion.
So your stance is a moral stance based on
Look.
because of he allowed a party at his Mar-a-Lago.
Look, the one thing that Bill Clinton had right, probably,
Yeah.
the one thing he had right was don't ask, don't tell. Your sexual orientation and your personal sexual life and what you do, mutually consenting adults, that's your business, none of anybody else's.
Right.
Keep it to yourself and don't flaunt it. If you want to be that, that's up to you.
Yeah.
If you don't want to be that, that's up to you.
Yeah.
But leave it out of government policy, leave it out of electoral politics.
But there's a flaw with that, Jacob, because even though they were given the rights to adopt and all these other things, they were not allowed to go into their partner, even if they weren't married. They were the closest one. They were denied access to this and everything. And, even though you could go in to somebody, so the government was involved in it, and it was confusing, and so I'm not trying to support homosexuality at all. I knew it was coming, but
look, on a state by state basis,
there's that mixture always with politics and
yes.
morality and all
yes.
that. And for Christians, will be on the horns of a dilemma.
They will be on the horns of a dilemma. What I'm favor is on a state by state basis by referendum, not by legislative vote, but by referendum on a state by state basis.
10th Amendment.
A state, exactly. No, a state can decide whether it wants to allow civil unions of a same sex nature.
Well, it's
It should be
nation.
left
It's
to the
already.
states.
It's every state allows that.
Yeah, no, it's
The Supreme Court decreed it.
Yeah.
When Obama lit the White House up with the homosexual flag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but we know that sin debases a nation. We know that.
That's
You're
correct.
right, Jacob. Prayer is important and everything, but I could never vote for the Democrats. I
couldn't either.
I could
certainly
never
couldn't.
vote for anybody, any politician that supports abortion.
Neither could I.
So that's always been for 40 years my one thing. Do you support? Are you pro-life? If not, there's no way I'm going to vote for you.
Correct.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, I wanted to bring this up real quick as we're talking about voting and stuff like that. Among young people, they see this. Young people see this, and there's a crisis among them because many of them are turning away from the big cities. They see the problem with the Democrat cities, and we talked about this before. But here's the new information. The number one trend search is called Live Off the Grid. People want to get out of big cities as they see it's worsening in big cities. Obviously, Democratic cities are the worst, but they want to get to basically off the grid stuff. One of the best selling items on Home Depot, which is a basically a do it yourself type of hardware store, is a getaway pad. About $43,000 will cost you a getaway pad, which is basically off the grid living. And with SpaceX, Starlink coming out, even better now, and affordability issues, people are getting out. People are wanting to get out of cities and live in other places that it's not even, it's just rural. And one of the things that's interesting with young people is the fact that they watch these videos online, and one of the number one videos ever in the history of YouTube is called Van Life. People wanting to live in a van and driving around, and I guess young people's dream. That's one thing. Older people, middle-aged people, midlife crisis, I guess you could say, they're turning to drugs, booze, and mushrooms. So people want to get out and just leave the cities, leave the areas, want to live on their own off the grid. Middle-aged people want to get, I guess you could say that they want to tune out. They want to get into mushrooms. And I guess it's a big deal because even Janet Yellen, when she was in China, she took some of the magic mushrooms in China, which is a huge trend. And she said she didn't even know she took any.
like Clinton, she didn't swallow them.
which I doubt. But just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Are people tuning out completely? Whether one, I want to get out of the city, I don't want to deal with anybody, I want to live alone, which has problems in and of themselves, especially as believers, right? Secondly, middle-aged people just tuning out and going for marijuana, hallucinogen drugs like mushrooms and LSD, and just tuning out completely. Your thoughts? We'll start with Jacob.
I think it is absolutely true. Something happened in the 1960s. In the 1960s, let's not forget the hippies of my generation are now late middle-aged people at youngest. Most are, like myself, senior citizens already. Okay. So it's not like they've turned to it. They've came with it. they came, they came with it.
Yeah.
So I don't see this turning to it. I think they can, but what I do see happening is drugs that were traditionally associated with the inner cities and that flourished in underprivileged communities, particularly minority communities. Not so much heroin, but something worse than heroin. Opioids.
Yeah.
Heroin is an opiate, but you have more potent opiates now that are available in pill form.
Yeah.
Fentanyl being one of them, but it's not the only one. To see people, okay, I understand you came from a world of marijuana and LSD. In my case, that was followed by cocaine. I get that. But to see them turning into junkies,
Jacob, let me ask you this. I'll stop you right there. Let me ask you this. What okay, so they fell into it. They came with that, and obviously there was a reason why they got into it in the first place, right? There's a reason why. What was that reason? I mean, maybe you could speak of your own personal experience, but what was the reason? Just this voluminous amount of young people turn to LSD and things like that.
Okay, if you go back to the 1960s, there were people who were into marijuana, certainly mild hallucinogens like marijuana and cocaine. They were basically black jazz and blues musicians.
Okay.
It goes back to entertainers like Cab Calloway, Minnie the Moocher. She fell in love with a bloke named Smokey. He loved her. She loved him, though he was cokey. Took her down to Chinatown, taught her how to kick the gong around. Those were things in what people say ebonics, jive, Black American slang. Kick the gong around meant, to smoke opium. Being cokey meant you sniffed cocaine, and he would push his nose. She loved him that he was coke, and Cab Calloway at the Cotton Club in New York would push his nose, and these things had gone on. But that music of the blues and bebop, jazz, came to influence early rock and roll. So that was one way into it. These white musicians began playing, as white people have always adopted music from the black man. That was jazz, that was gospel, that was a lot of things. But that was something there. People were looking for a new kind of thrill, a new kind of kick. Now, I remember marijuana was seen as a safer alternative to getting drunk, to being a juice head. That was for the greasers of the 50s. We're into peace. Have a joint, man. Relax. We don't want to fight. We don't want to we just want to smoke. It was that kind of thing. Additionally, there was the failure of the mainstream churches and denominations. The only revival that could have happened was the Jesus movement, the hippie thing. Right. Which Calvary Chapels came from it. The churches had pretty much lost their credibility among young people. Young people began looking for spirituality elsewhere. Unfortunately, they turned with the Maharishi to Eastern religion, Hinduism, but they also turned to psychedelic drugs with people like Timothy Leary. And going back again to the American Indians, peyote and mescaline. Remember, Native American Indians had used these drugs for probably thousands of years.
Yeah.
They'd used these hallucinogens for thousands of years. So we're getting back to the land and we're getting back to Mother Earth. That was the setting by which it came into being. And that's why those things blossomed then. But before long, it turned into something very ugly.
Yeah. Now, okay, so they came with it. Now it seems like whether they kicked it, whether they still did it, now it's surging. I mean, here's some statistics. Daily cannabis use, 1 in 10 adults smoke marijuana on a daily basis among middle age, so like basically 40 to 60 years old. 1 in 10. That is a lot of people every day. It's talking about everyday cannabis use, everyday
Yep.
LSD use, everyday shrooms, which obviously has varieties of different ones, but it is skyrocketing among middle-aged to 60-year-old. I mean, these are people that, well, by now should know better, but they're tuning out. They don't want to deal with life.
Yeah.
Just like the young people.
But it's the fentanyl that scares me. Fentanyl scares me more than all of those stats combined.
That is true.
And it's gone and it's invaded the middle class.
Steve,
Yeah, horse tranquilizers too.
if I could bring it into the present, Marco, as I've traveled, I see a lot of young people, I talk to them and everything, and they've all had their parents of my generation inflict them with rock and roll, classic rock, all this stuff. They talk about their parents playing the records all day long. And so the influence of our music, of course, was drug laced, you know, Grace Slick saying, don't take the pills that your mother gives you, they don't do anything, you know, all this sort of stuff. And so they've grown up on hearing the rock and roll of our generation, which helped lead us and propel us and accept drug use. So it's no surprise to me that the current generation and a lot of younger people who think the music nowadays is crap, that have held on to this music and is creating this new hippie lifestyle, you know, that's going on, and of RVing. And plus there's also, if I could tie it into last week's problem about these young people talking about how in today's economy, they can't make it.
Right.
So they need an alternative lifestyle to be able to. So here you get a van, you paid for it, it's now your house, and you can go and see the world. You don't have to pay state tax. You don't have to pay your other taxes, such as real estate taxes and all this. And so now they can have a lifestyle that they believe is that's bothering me. Sorry, my phone rang. So anyway, that's some of this I see comes from that. And the use of psychedelics such as psilocybin, it doesn't usually make you very sick, and it just for 3 hours you start seeing colors, and time goes by so slow, and it's so enjoyable, you know. So, and they're finding these drugs, and it creates this alternative lifestyle. They're trying to escape failing capitalism. They're trying to escape reality.
Yeah.
They're trying to find a way to get back to the garden, as David Crosby wrote, but that garden is a sewage, and that's what this world is right now and where it's headed. And so we never got back to the garden. We ain't going to go back to the garden until Jesus comes.
That's right.
With the millennial kingdom. But I think that's a lot of it, is the influence of rock and roll is still on a lot of today's youth and the parents that followed the children of my generation, that we inflicted our music on them.
Yeah, I want Janet Yellen to take a drug test, because she says she didn't feel anything. She was just, you know, she had a good time. She had a good time.
Did in hell too.
Yeah. Davey,
I believe her. I'm convinced that woman had an elective lobotomy at some point. She might be telling the truth.
I just think the real ironic thing and the real sad thing too is the fact that, you know, they're legalizing things like marijuana. Here in Victoria, we've just had magic mushrooms legalized now.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, they're promoting this culture of death, but they're trying to ban things like vitamin supplements, anything that'll keep you healthy. Like in New Zealand, they've had that therapeutic medicine bill passed soon, so they can basically you know, ban things like, yeah, zinc, vitamin C, anything
Supplements. Oh,
it's crazy.
yeah, and these people are turning out. Now, in terms of influence, I want to finish our catching up before we turn to backstage. And don't forget, send the questions in. We're taking questions on Rumble, so we'll be jumping off YouTube and Facebook and heading into backstage on the other platforms, but we'll be taking questions on Rumble. So we get Jacob, we've got a lot of questions coming in. Jacob and David, besides the drugs, besides the everyday uses, besides tuning out and going into the wilderness experience, maybe both high and drugged up and living in a van, which has always been, you know, I guess that's what my parents used to warn me. You know, if you don't do something with your life, you're going to end up in a van drugged out.
You're going to be doing a lot of doobie rolling when you're living in a van down by the river.
Now I guess that's the best thing in life. I don't know how that turned
That's the
out.
goal.
Well, for that, but the other alternatives is you don't own a van, you're on the street in North Philly
Yeah,
or
and the
down there,
vans are like,
it's worse, or on the LA.
yeah, vans are here like $50,000 now. I mean, I guess that wouldn't be a bad deal nowadays. You get a van for $50,000.
I'll never forget the time I was in the house of a guy who became a Christian, but he obviously had something wrong with him. I guess he was a casualty from the 60s in the psychedelic era, and he lived in a shack in the mountains above Taos, New Mexico. He literally lived in a shack that he built, and he lived in a shack. And I was in this, and I'm saying, this is terrible. The guy, I didn't say it to him, but he lives like this, and this is a shack. I'm telling you, on the wall, he had his university degree.
No way.
He was a civil engineer with a degree from a prominent university.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Very sad thing.
He could have built anything. He could have built.
A shack. Yeah. Now the influencing here and talk about spirituality. A lot of young influencers on YouTube, social media. So I'm just referring to the young YouTubers and young influential, which, by the way, is one of the highest goals young people in America want to become. They don't want to become doctors. They don't want to become engineers anymore. They want to become YouTube influencers. Side story, but there's a trend in society that these YouTube influencers or social media influencers are going into Islam. From Australia to the UK to the US, the idea that Christianity is so weak and so irrelevant, we can no longer even include it as a top major religion. It's rotten. They're leaving. Some of them were raised Christians, but they see the forces of the radical left. They see the LGBT, the trans, the drag queens, the Marxism, the globalism, and they said nobody can defeat that. We have to join something that can be structure, something that has force, something that is a yes or a no. And they say that's Sharia law. That's Islam. So here in the West, here in California specifically, or in the United States in general, there are conservative movements that are saying we can't join with churches anymore because they all fly the flag, the LGBT flag, and we don't trust them anymore. We have to go with Muslims, and they go to parents' meeting, they go to board meetings with Muslims, joining hand with Muslims, and said we'd rather be under Sharia law than under the LGBT flag. And that's been a trend over the past few years. Here's social media influencers from all over the Western world saying we'll become Muslims, including very popular ones like Sneeko, which is a young influencer on for young kids, conservative kids, that see him as a way to, how do we bridge spirituality, religion, and not get into LGBT stuff, because a lot of Christians, they are LGBT or they believe in it. And by far the most influential one, which has happened last year, was Andrew Tate, kickboxing Bulgarian kickboxer, was raised in Romania as a Christian. He says that he embraced Islam because he saw it, it was better for him the way he thinks. And he converted to Islam because he saw Christianity as weak and not being able to give him anything. And so this is just not a vacuum. This is several influencers. So this idea of converting to Islam because Christianity is so weak. Jacob, we'll start with you. Did they not?
Over 30 years ago, Muslim activists were saying this in London and in England. They were saying that we have an absolute moral standard. Look at what's happening. Your bishops are homosexuals of the Church of England. And they were right. They were pointing these things out and they were highlighting them.
Yes.
This is now simply being amplified because of internet. because of the internet. But it's not new. Secondly, I would be the first to agree it is an indictment of Hillsong, of Mike Bickle, of Andy Stanley, of Furtick, and these other failed or pseudo-Christian gurus who are masquerading as born-again Christians when they're not teaching evangelical Christianity. They're Carl Lynn types or they're Andy Stanley types who are heretics. And it is an indictment of what's become of mainstream Western evangelicism. I would agree with that. But now let's look at what these people like Tate are doing, or the recently deceased Irish pop singer Sinead O'Connor, who turned to Islam. What they are doing is two things. One, they are confusing Christianity with churchianity. They're looking not at Christianity and the teachings of Christ or the scriptures. They're looking at churchianity. They're looking at the teachings and example of a backslidden church, including much of evangelicism. Second thing, they're ignoring the truth about Islam. There are people, even in Iran, with this horrible persecution, even in Iran, certainly in Indonesia, certainly in other areas of Africa and Asia, but Bangladesh, Indonesian, probably the biggest. Now it's come to Iran, that the same things that these people are saying, Christianity offers us nothing, we're going to Islam. Young people in the Far East and in Asia are saying, Islam offers us nothing, we're turning to Christ.
In Iran especially, yeah.
They're not seeing the truth about Islam. They're not being told the truth about it. They're being told lies funded by the Saudi government with the blessings of the Bush family and people like that, but they're not being told the truth about Islam. And they're not understanding that there are other young people in the Islamic world who are saying the same things about Islam they're saying about Christianity. But of course, it's not Christianity, it's churchianity. That is my perspective.
Yeah. David, what's the attraction?
Well, it's you have a couple generations that don't know how to critically think or debate. So what happens is a lot of these influencers, like Jacob pointed out, they set up a straw man and said, look, this is what Christianity is. They have no standards. They have no rules. It's the same thing. My father looked at Christianity and he saw, my dad went to church on Sunday and saw all these people acting holy. And then during the week, they were coming to his gas station to buy moonshine and stuff like that. And they weren't so holy anymore. And so he saw the hypocrisy of it. And so they set the bad examples up and saying, oh, they have no standards. But yet that's easy to do. But you have to look at the standard is Jesus Christ and then his word. And that's the rules. That's the guide. That's the standard. And so if you remove the standard by, making it not true just by setting up these other hypocrites, then it's easy to influence generations of people. Now, that man, that kickboxer guy, if you know kickboxing, those guys are very disciplined people.
Yeah.
They train, and they build their bodies into a machine that they can use. And so he would want something that's very disciplined, very rigid to fit his lifestyle.
He said that.
Okay.
He said, this fits me. It fits me. And this is
It
what I'm
fits
about.
me.
Yeah.
But I don't know how many people, and they also, as Jacob pointed out, they don't understand what Sharia law really is. They don't, because they don't go to places where homosexuals are tossed off roofs.
That's right.
They don't go to places. Now, I understand they're against homosexuality, and they use that as a banner, say, hey, look, these people are perverted, and so we don't allow this. But homosexuality in Islam is not outlawed. It's, it's not outlawed. It's not in the command. and
Yeah.
hadiths and all that. So it's still protected, or it's still not talked about, but yet it's practiced in many places. And so, you know,
Secretly.
so that's the thing. They're just as two-faced. They're just as
Right.
corrupt. It's just they hide it better, and then they know how to stand up and raise their banners, and yet point to the false flag of bad Christians.
That's
So
right. Jake, I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to return to David. If you had these young men, whether it's Andrew Tate, whether it's Sneaker, whether these other influencers in the UK or Australia, if you had them before you and they said, look, you never were told about Islam. You don't know what Islam is about. You don't know. What two things would you tell them? So we'll go with Jacob first. What two things?
What I would do, I would get Muslims, possibly some that I've led to Christ myself, Shia Muslims mainly. Most of the Muslims I've led to Christ are Shia. And I would have young, well, they're maybe in their 30s now. I would have people saved out of Islam tell them the truth about Islam from the perspective of somebody who was born into an Islamic country, culture, and family, grew up in Islam, and turned to Christ. I would have ex-Muslims who've come to faith in Christ tell them the truth about Islam. That would be my first strategy.
All right, let's say you didn't have that because you're talking to them and then there's no ex-Muslims around you, but what two things you need to tell them? Like, look, this is what Islam is about, two things, and just take it home with you and really think about it.
Okay, I have been from one end of the Muslim world to the other. I've been from Morocco. I've been to Jordan. I've been to Saudi Arabia. I have been as far as Brunei, Malaysia, Turkey. I've been from one end of the Muslim world to another. I've yet to set foot in one that does not reek of camel urine. It is a disgusting culture and civilization. I don't think you, as a Western person, would want to live in it. Now, there are some very wealthy Saudis who have people who they pay very little, who are their servants, who make sure that the privileged, the House of Saud or the Wahhab, live well. But you look at what happens, even in a rich place like Dubai. You've got people from Pakistan and Africa making 90 cents an hour. Find me one of the 52 Muslim countries in the world that has the same freedom you have in the United States or Canada or Australia. You can't show me one. You don't really know what Islam is. Secondly, I would say you don't know what Christianity is. You see something that Jesus called apostasy. What you are looking at as Christian is not Christianity. It is apostasy. The very fact that they are doing these things proves they are what Jesus warned against. They are false Christians. That's what I would show them.
Very good. David, what about you? Two things that you said, look, you're getting into this. They didn't tell you. This is what you need to know.
Well, one, having read the Quran and use it to try to get Muslims to come out, I would could try to use that to show them actually how bad the Quran is. Like Alexander the Great found the sun setting in a muddy pool. Show them how their history within the Quran is out of sync with time. The misplacing of characters from Persia to Egypt. These are just obvious mistakes historically, that this is not a book that came from an all-knowing God, because he got his history wrong, he's got his people wrong, he's got his things wrong. That could be one way. Another way, I would get a good book like this gentleman that passed, his book on, or show him his testimony, that he wrote a book called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, and see if that would help them. But I'd also I would point out, look, you don't understand what true Islam is. It still has slavery in certain countries, and they still allow it. And yet you think it's all freedom, it's all discipline, it's all that. But you go to one of these countries, you have liberal Muslims, you have very liberal Muslims. They don't practice the fasting. They don't practice the holidays. They don't go, so they have all the same troubles that the Christian church has, but they know how to make publicity
Yep.
that
Yep.
paints
Would you-
them
would
in
you-
the right
yep.
light.
Would you like to see in the Quran and in the Hadith where Muhammad told his followers to drink camel urine?
Yeah,
Do you want to drink some camel urine?
yeah.
You want to be a Muslim? You really want to drink camel urine? Or I would say to them, let's understand something. According to the teachings of Muhammad, Muslims only have one set of intestines. Infidels have 7. You're not a Muslim yet. Do you have 7 sets of intestines or one? Well, Muhammad said you have 7. Well, let me go on and ask you this. Miriam is the name for Mary in Hebrew. The mother of Jesus' name was Miriam, and the sister of Moses' name was Miriam. The Quran says they're the same woman. Given the fact that they lived approximately 1,400 years apart, how can the sister of Moses and the mother of Jesus be the same woman? Can you answer me that question? Why will you believe something that nobody in their right mind would believe?
So,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when you're talking about reading the Quran, I don't even think most Muslims read the Quran, just like
No.
no, most of them, the ones I
You have
talk
to read
to,
it- You have to read it in Arabic, so you can even
well, they
read it.
tell you that, but then you can point out that there's translators that Islam thinks are good scholars. And then it's also a thing is saying that God was so perfect, he didn't want Indonesians or people from other countries to know what his word is and allow him to translate it. And so they set that standard so they can get out of these traps with someone that they've laid for themselves. They try to get out of these traps that of the errors that are found in the Quran, whether you read it in Arabic or whether you read it in English. It's the same thing. I mean, it says the same stuff. Why do they allow it to be translated, into this?
Lots of
They're
problems.
scholars translated.
Yeah, lots of problems, and we can go on and have a whole section on it, but just wanted to point something out and then just let you guys comment, and we'll be done. He says, I don't see God working. I don't see people fearing God. I don't see, and you know, I can't disagree with them because I know
I do too.
I know churches, I know people that claim to be Christians, but they live like Gehenna. They live like there's no God. So there's no fear in God. I understand that part. But I also think that God is working in this world. When he says, well, God's not working,
Yes.
Islam's the only one that's working, which I'll come back to that point in a
Well,
minute.
you have to have eyes to see.
Yeah. But let me finish this thought. Both of you. We've seen a couple of things that people are questioning whether this is of God or was it not God, a coincidence. We've seen the mural of George Floyd in Toledo, Ohio, which was basically a whole mural, a whole wall, and him being painted as a king, kind of like a Messiah figure, like Pelosi said. He's like Jesus to us. And believe it or not, there was no rain in the forecast. A couple of clouds hovered over that area. Lightning struck. The whole thing came down. I mean, not the whole thing. Just the part where George Floyd was painted as a Messiah-like figure with the crown, completely obliterated, destroyed. Some people said that is God. Some people say coincidence. Lightning strikes different houses all the time. We just don't know about it. Dodger Stadium floods. They just hosted the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, which make fun of course, Catholics, but more important, they blaspheme Christ at the cross and with some sexual practices there. And the whole thing, it's flooded. And some people say, well, that's just climate change. Do you see God working in nature today? Do you see God working in a way to show himself in powerful ways? I know the book of Revelation will be no doubt that who he is, and people are going to freak out. But Jake, start with you, and then we'll go to Dave, and we'll be done. Are these
these are only recent episodes or instances of this. I
Right.
remember when the second highest clergyman in the Anglican Communion, the Church of England, Episcopalianism, call it what you want globally, the Archbishop of York in England at York Minster Cathedral, he came and he said, to be a Christian, you don't have to believe in the historicity of the resurrection of Christ or his virgin birth. The next day, lightning struck the cathedral and set it on
Wow.
fire. The
Yeah.
next day, I remember the Anglican bishop in Christchurch, New Zealand, pushing for homosexual and lesbian ordination in the Anglican Church in New Zealand. I remember the cathedral, the Anglican Cathedral in Cathedral Square, where Ray Comfort used to debate the wizard in evangelism in Christchurch. The thing was demolished by the earthquake. No other building was as completely destroyed, I don't think, as that Anglican cathedral. I've seen this kind of thing happen before more than once, and I do believe it is emblematic of God's judgment, and it's in response to specific things that show his displeasure. I have no doubt. I don't think they're coincidences.
Very good. David?
Yeah, God is at work to this day. You know, and I see his hand for Christians. We see his hand helping us and working towards us. But we also know he said that in the last days, I will pour out my rain on one city and on another I won't,
Yep.
and it'll dry and it'll burn up. So he says he's going to be active in the world,
Amen.
Yep.
more so in the last days.
Well, when you take George Floyd, now I don't agree with what happened to him, but the autopsy showed he was not asphyxiated. That cop didn't kill him. They
Right.
found opiates in his system. The ordeal with the policeman may have been a contributing factor, but the cop didn't kill him by suffocation. That's not what happened. George Floyd had 12 felony arrests for violent crimes perpetrated mainly against other blacks, and he at one time assaulted a pregnant woman with a knife during a robbery. He was no saint, but and then when it happened, he was passing on counterfeit money to buy tobacco, which he knew was counterfeit. He was shown it was counterfeit, and he still got angry and became violently angry, and the police came. To take someone like that who attacked a pregnant woman with a knife, who's committed 12 crimes, at least 12, for which he was arrested against other blacks, and spent 5 years in prison for violent crime in Texas, I believe. To take someone like that and put him on a mural as a Christ figure, and then the lightning comes and doesn't destroy the mural to the right of it or the mural to the left of it. It only destroys the one of Floyd. No, I don't think it's a coincidence.
That's right. That's right. No, you guys are absolutely right. I think these are definite signs that God is still active. God knows, God hears, God sees, and he's working, but he's working in a way that people don't want him to work. He's very patient toward people. We want God to judge everything, but he would have to judge everyone and everything at the same time, including those who don't believe, which God doesn't want them to perish, but wants them to come to repentance.
That's right.
So God's patience is beyond our comprehension. And yet he will demonstrate his power, according to the prophets in the book of Revelation, in the time to come. And of course, people will be able to see it and be freaked out. So I love when they hear, and I love when people that are thinking about Islam or they're Muslims and stuff, and they say, we worship the same God. And I go, really? I said, well, then you believe that God has a son. Then you believe God is spirit. Then you believe God is father. Then you believe God sent his son to rise from the dead, to die and rise from the dead. They automatically say, no, we don't believe in that God. They say, well, that's settled the case. We don't believe in the same God. We believe in a different God. And Yahweh and Allah are never, ever the same. And so I recommend, if anybody's really more interested in the topic, Jacob's have 5 questions for Islam that on the Memorial website, memorial.org. You can avail yourself of that. I think there's other videos that Jacob talks about it as well. I recommend Nabil, the testimony of Nabil. I think that's the one you're talking about, Jacob. He recently
we'd also recommend the ministry of people like David Wood and Jay Smith.
Absolutely.
And Hashtun Tash, all of which I think are available. You can watch them on RTN and other platforms.
Yeah, I think there's videos on YouTube and things like that of them.
Yes.
And I think Jay Smith took your place at Speaker's Corner, right, Jacob? I think. you
Yeah,
were-
I was his predecessor, but I was better with Orthodox Jews and Catholics. I debated Muslims, but he was
Yeah.
superior to me in Islam.
Yeah,
Hands down.
I remember the story you told me when they were trying to kick the ladder from you.
Oh
but
yeah,
that's-
yeah, that was in 1990. But
we'll have to tell that story again. It's somewhere in Catching Up to tell the story. It was
Jay
fantastic.
Smith is fantastic.
Yes,
I did a conference with him at Jack Hibbs Church once. He's fantastic.
Yeah, so get a hold of that if you have more information. Memorial.org, 5 questions for Islam, and then the ministries we recommended in terms of finding apologetics against Islam, and we do pray for people like what's his name, Sneeko, the influential guy.
Oh, these influencers, yeah.
And then Tate. We pray for them because they've really been told something that is not.
Yes.
Really been something that is untrue, and whether for conveniences, but yeah, Jacob, you're right. It is an indictment on the church that people can't see God working because the believers are not being salt and light. They've compromised with sin, false churches, false believers, apostasy, and it's really an indictment that people can't see Christ in this world because as Christians we're not shining as Jesus called us to be, salt and light. So thank you guys for being with us on Catching Up. We're going to jump onto Backstage, which is the other part of Catching Up that we can't show on certain platforms. We have questions, and we're going to talk about round 2. Are you ready for round 2?
Yes.
Up. So God bless you guys. We'll see you in a few minutes.
We don't have to hold back no more, Marco.
Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan to India to Africa and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.